Have you noticed how the most compelling people in your life aren't the ones constantly available to you? The ones who command true respect. They're selective with their presence. Their silence speaks volumes more than others' endless words. What if I told you that your excessive availability is secretly draining your power, and the path to reclaiming it lies in something Carl Jung understood decades ago? The most fascinating people in any room aren't those desperately seeking attention. They're the ones who've mastered the art of calculated absence, a psychological territory few dare to explore. Jung called this phenomenon psychic economy, the management of your internal energy. And most people are bankrupting themselves daily without even realizing it. Think about it. When was the last time you felt completely drained after interacting with certain people? That exhaustion isn't random. It's the direct result of unconscious energy transactions, what Jung might call psychic vampirism. Ancient wisdom recognized this truth long before modern psychology. The Stoics practiced strategic withdrawal. Eastern philosophies emphasize the power of emptiness. Even Shakespeare wrote, "Men of few words are the best men." But before we dive deeper, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't about manipulation or playing games. This is about reclaiming your psychological sovereignty, the birthright that most have unknowingly surrendered to societal expectations, technological demands, and relationship patterns that serve everyone but yourself. The more emotionally available you make yourself to others, the less they value your presence. This isn't cynicism, it's human psychology. When something is abundant, its perceived value diminishes. Your attention, your emotional labor, your time. These are currencies you've been giving away without recognizing their worth. Notice how people who constantly seek validation through availability often receive the least respect. Meanwhile, those who carefully control their presence create an inexplicable gravity around themselves. Consider those in your life who command the most respect. Are they the ones who are constantly accessible, always responding, perpetually explaining themselves? Or are they the ones who maintain a certain psychological distance, a selective availability that makes their presence feel like a gift rather than a given? But here's where it gets interesting. Your reactions are being harvested. Every time you immediately respond to that text, jump to explain yourself, or rush to smooth over conflict, you're being conditioned. People around you learn exactly which buttons to push to extract the responses they desire. Jung understood that these patterns form invisible chains. You become predictable, manipulable, a character in someone else's narrative rather than the author of your own. Think of the friend who knows exactly what story will make you angry about politics. The family member who knows precisely how to trigger your guilt. The colleague who can reliably extract your help even when you're overwhelmed. These aren't conscious conspiracies. They're unconscious adaptations. People naturally learn the path of least resistance to get what they need from you. And when you're excessively available, you train them to expect little resistance at all. Nietzsche called this the spirit of gravity, the accumulated weight of expectations and patterns that pull you down into predetermined paths. Breaking free requires something counterintuitive, strategic withdrawal. But what happens when you suddenly withdraw this predictability? When you withdraw your availability from those accustomed to controlling your reactions, you create a psychological crisis for them. Their predictable world suddenly contains an unpredictable element, you. This is where transformation begins. In that space of calculated absence, power dynamics fundamentally shift. The people who took your energy for granted suddenly find themselves in unfamiliar territory. Jung observed that crisis precedes transformation. By disrupting established patterns through your selective unavailability, you create the necessary conditions for relationship dynamics to evolve. Notice how people react when you don't immediately respond to messages, when you don't automatically agree to requests, when you don't rush to fill uncomfortable silences in conversation. Their reactions reveal the unspoken contracts you've been unconsciously signing. But be warned, this transition rarely happens smoothly. When you start practicing selective unavailability, expect resistance. Expect guilt trips, accusations of being different or distant. These are simply the mechanisms others use to reinstall the old dynamics that benefited them. This resistance is actually confirmation that you're reclaiming your power. The stronger the pushback, the more dependent others were on your constant availability. Schopenhauer noted that all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. Your new boundaries will follow this same pattern in the minds of others. The psychology behind this resistance is fascinating. People build mental models of who you are and how you'll behave. When you disrupt these models by becoming less predictably available, you trigger what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable mental state that occurs when reality contradicts expectations. They have 2 choices: adjust their mental model of you, or try to force you back into conformity with their expectations. Most will initially attempt the latter. But what about connection? What about relationships? Doesn't unavailability threaten the very bonds we value? True connection isn't built on constant availability. It's built on authentic presence. When you're perpetually available, you're rarely fully present. Your energy is dispersed, diluted across countless interactions and obligations that don't truly matter to you. Jung's concept of the persona, the social mask we wear, becomes relevant here. Many of us have constructed personas that are pathologically accommodating, designed to please everyone at the expense of our true selves. The irony? This people-pleasing persona actually prevents genuine connection, because people aren't connecting with you. They're connecting with your mask. Eastern philosophies have long recognized the difference between quantity and quality of presence. The Zen concept of mu, emptiness, teaches that only when the cup is empty can it be filled with something new. Your psychological cup must sometimes be emptied of superficial connections to make space for profound ones. Consider how technology has exploited this distinction. Social media platforms create the illusion of connection through constant availability, while often leaving us feeling more isolated than ever. This is no accident. It's by design. These systems profit from harvesting your attention and reactions, just as certain people in your life do. Silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's a psychological force with immense power. When wielded unconsciously, silence can be passive aggression, a weapon that damages relationships. But when wielded consciously, silence becomes a tool for profound transformation. This is what Jung meant by holding the tension of opposites. Instead of immediately discharging your emotional energy through reactions, you learn to contain it, direct it, transform it. The spectrum of silence ranges from avoidance, destructive, to presence, constructive. Avoidant silence runs from connection, present silence runs deeper into it. The difference lies in intention and awareness. Think of the quality of silence between people who truly understand each other, how it feels rich rather than empty. This is the silence of depth, not distance. It's the difference between 2 people staring at their phones while sitting together versus two people sharing a meaningful glance that requires no words. And this is precisely when most people retreat, when they feel the discomfort of that contained energy. They rush back to familiar patterns of over-availability because the alternative requires strength they haven't yet developed. Each time you choose not to react, not to explain, not to be immediately available, you reclaim a portion of your psychic energy. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming intentional. It's understanding that your energy is finite and precious, and directing it consciously rather than dispensing it reflexively. Jung viewed psychic energy much like modern physics views physical energy. It cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. When you stop dispersing your energy across countless unnecessary interactions, it doesn't disappear. It becomes available for deeper purposes. Notice how creative insights often come during periods of solitude, how spiritual breakthroughs rarely occur in crowds, how your most authentic self emerges not in reaction to others, but in communion with your own depths. If you're feeling that familiar resistance rising within you now, you're exactly where you need to be. Stay with this discomfort. It's the feeling of old patterns being disrupted. What I'm about to share contradicts everything most people believe about personal power. True power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from being uncontrollable yourself. When you master selective unavailability, you step outside the predictable patterns others have come to expect from you. You become the observer rather than the constantly observed. This shift in perspective allows you to see relationship dynamics that were previously invisible to you, the subtle ways your energy was being directed and depleted without your conscious consent. Quantum physics offers a striking parallel in the observer effect, the phenomenon where the mere act of observation changes what's being observed. When you withdraw from automatic participation in established patterns and begin to observe them instead, those patterns inevitably change. This is why meditation and mindfulness practices emphasize the role of the witnessing consciousness, the part of you that can observe thoughts and emotions without immediately reacting to them. This witnessing presence is the foundation of psychological freedom. There exists a threshold where your calculated absence begins to transform not just your relationships, but your entire reality. As you practice selective unavailability, you'll notice a fascinating phenomenon. People begin to value your presence in a fundamentally different way. Interactions become more meaningful, more purposeful. The constant background noise of obligatory interactions fades, replaced by connections that actually matter. The philosopher Kierkegaard distinguished between the aesthetic life, driven by immediate pleasure and avoidance of boredom, and the ethical life, driven by commitment and meaning. Selective unavailability helps you transition from the former to the latter. You'll find yourself naturally gravitating toward relationships and activities that align with your authentic values, rather than merely filling space or meeting others' expectations. This isn't selfishness, it's integrity, the alignment of your outer actions with your inner truth. But reaching this threshold requires consistency. It requires weathering the discomfort of breaking old patterns and establishing new ones. The ultimate purpose of controlled unavailability isn't to manipulate others, it's to liberate yourself. When you no longer feel compelled to respond, to explain, to be constantly available, you reclaim sovereignty over your own psychological territory. You become the gatekeeper of your energy, rather than watching it be depleted by endless demands and expectations. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole by integrating the aspects of yourself that social conditioning fragmented. The psychologist Roberto Assagioli extended this concept with his theory of psychosynthesis, the idea that psychological health comes not just from understanding yourself, but from actively directing your consciousness according to your highest values. Your selective unavailability creates the necessary space for this internal integration and direction. It allows you to hear your own voice amid the chorus of expectations and demands that constantly surround you. The shadow side of availability is the fear that if you're not constantly present, you'll be forgotten, abandoned, replaced. This fear drives much of our compulsive availability. Many people trace this fear to childhood experiences, moments when their needs went unmet, when their presence seemed insufficient, when love felt conditional upon performance. The adult pattern of excessive availability often begins as a child's strategy for securing connection. But consider this. What if your absence created a space that actually strengthened meaningful connections while allowing superficial ones to naturally fade? In nature, plants require proper spacing to thrive. Too close together, they compete for resources and weaken each other. The same principle applies to human connections. Your selective unavailability isn't abandonment. It's creating the optimal conditions for authentic relationships to flourish. Your unavailability is not emptiness. It's fullness that refuses to be diluted. Your silence is not absence. It's presence so complete it requires no validation. The energy you reclaim through selective unavailability becomes the foundation for authentic self-expression and genuine connection. The path begins with a simple choice. Will you automatically respond to the next demand on your energy? Or will you pause, breathe, and consciously decide whether this deserves your precious attention? Practice this in small ways first. Wait 5 minutes before responding to non-urgent messages. Allow silence to exist in conversations without rushing to fill it. Say, "I'll think about it," instead of immediately agreeing to requests. Schedule specific times for checking communications rather than being perpetually accessible. Notice the underlying emotions that drive your compulsive availability. With each small act of selective unavailability, you strengthen your psychological sovereignty. You cultivate what the Stoics called the inner citadel, a core of calm self-possession that remains untouched by external demands and reactions. The control you've surrendered can be reclaimed. The energy you've dispersed can be gathered. The power you've given away can be restored. But only when you embrace the transformative power of calculated absence. Remember what Jung himself wrote. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. The question isn't whether you can afford to be less available. The question is, can you afford not to be? Fade to silence, with final visual of person, standing in peaceful solitude, radiating quiet power,